Emotional reunion. An American veteran travels halfway across the world to return an arm bone to a Vietnamese soldier. It all began with a story that sounds almost impossible, a tale of war, loss, compassion, and a promise kept after nearly half a century. In 2013, an American veteran traveled halfway across the world to Vietnam, carrying with him something that wasn't his, a bone from another man's arm. That bone, amputated in the middle of the Vietnam War, belonged to a Vietnamese soldier named Nguyen Quang Hung. And for more than 46 years, the man who saved his life, Dr. Sam Axelrad, had kept that piece of him in the hopes that one day he would be able to return it. This extraordinary journey first came to light when Mr. Chien Nguyen, a senior official at the Vietnamese Consulate General in Houston, received a highly unusual request. Dr. Sam was asking for a visa to Vietnam, nothing strange there, but also permission to carry human remains, the amputated bone of a Vietnamese soldier he had once treated in the war. In all my years of working at the Vietnamese consulate, Mr. Chien later said, I had never encountered a case like this. It was surreal. Rewinding to 1966, Dr. Sam Axelrad was a medical commander stationed at Radcliffe Base near An Khe, serving the U.S. Army. One day, a helicopter arrived with a critically wounded enemy soldier on board, a Viet Cong fighter whose arm had turned septic. That man was Nguyen Quang Hung. His right arm had become gangrenous and lifeless. In a desperate effort to save him, Dr. Sam and his team were forced to amputate over half of Hung's arm. But that wasn't the end of it. What happened next changed everything. Dr. Sam, moved by something he couldn't quite explain, decided to keep the amputated bone. No one told him to do so. No official reason required it. He simply did. When Hung regained consciousness days later, the pain in his arm was gone, replaced by a sense of strange peace. Though he had lost a limb, he recalled feeling relief. He was alive. And more than that, he was treated with kindness. The very people he had fought against, the Americans, had saved him and treated him with respect. Dr. Sam was one of them. Roughly 2 months later, Hung's condition had stabilized. That's when Dr. Sam received orders. The Vietnamese soldier had to be transferred out of the base. Hung feared the worst, convinced he was about to be exiled to Con Giao prison. But instead, something remarkable happened. Dr. Sam arranged for him to be sent to a U.S. military medical unit in An Thuc, now part of Gia Lai province, where Hung would work in the pharmacy distributing medication to American soldiers. That moment was their silent goodbye. Hung never saw Dr. Sam again. No letters, no news, nothing. In 1967, as Dr. Sam prepared to return to the United States, he began packing his belongings from the base. That's when he saw it again, the amputated piece of Hung's arm, tucked away among his wartime keepsakes. He paused. I could have thrown it away, he later admitted. But something stopped me. Without fully understanding why, he wrapped the bone and took it home with him to America. For decades, the bone remained inside a wooden chest in his home, resting beside more than 100 artifacts from the war. There were photographs of Vietnam, newspaper clippings, even a speech by President Lyndon B. Johnson. Among them were photos of Hung himself, young, wounded, but alive. Dr. Sam never spoke about what he had brought home. He never opened the chest, not for 40 years. It wasn't until 2010 that he found the strength to confront the past. After retiring, he decided he wanted to go back to Vietnam. He wanted to find the man whose life he had once saved. But that required opening the chest and reopening wounds he'd spent a lifetime trying to forget. Dr. Sam later explained, like many veterans, we suffered from what they call post-war trauma. We didn't want to remember. We didn't want to talk about it. But still, through all those years, the bone had remained. I always felt like it didn't belong to me, he said. I was just holding on to it until I could give it back. That same year, he made his first return trip to Vietnam. With no contact and very little information, he had no idea if Nguyen Quang Hung or if he would ever find him. He traveled from Ho Chi Minh City to Gia Lai, then to Binh Dinh and Hue, even venturing into northern Vietnam. The trip was emotional, filled with stories he shared with his children and grandchildren who accompanied him, but no trace of Hung. Then, something incredible happened. In 2012, while still searching, Dr. Sam crossed paths with a local journalist working for a Vietnamese newspaper. The journalist was so moved by his story that it was published later that November. Soon after, a miracle. One of the newspaper's readers recognized the name, the photos, the story. He knew the man Dr. Sam was looking for. It was Hung, and he was still alive. The reader connected the two, bridging nearly 5 decades of silence. When Dr. Sam received the news, he was overwhelmed with joy. Against all odds, the man he'd saved in 1966 was alive and waiting. Without hesitation, Dr. Sam planned a second trip, once again crossing oceans with his children and grandchildren. This time, he wasn't just going to search. He was going to return something he had safeguarded for 46 years, a part of a man's body, a fragment of war, and a memory frozen in time. On the morning of July 1st, 2013, Dr. Sam Axelrad stood once again in An Khê, Gia Lai, 47 years after he had last been there. But this time, he wasn't a military doctor. He was a 75-year-old man carrying a sacred piece of the past in a carefully wrapped package, the long-lost bone from Nguyen Quang Hung's amputated arm. The moment they met was beyond words. As the two men faced each other, former enemies bound by fate, the crowd around them stood silent, many unable to hold back their tears. The years had changed them both, yet the connection remained. Hung's voice trembled with emotion, and for a moment, he could only stare. His eyes welled up, his heart heavy with a joy so deep, it ached. "I never thought I'd live to see this day," he whispered. He had spent his entire adult life missing that part of himself, physically and emotionally. He had accepted its loss, but never expected it to return. Not like this, not in the hands of the very man who had once been on the other side of the battlefield. But Sam hadn't forgotten. Not the man, not the face, not the story, and certainly not the promise he'd made to himself, quietly, all those decades ago. "Why didn't you hand me over to the South Vietnamese army?" Hung asked softly, his voice breaking. "Why did you bring me here to An Khê?" Dr. Sam looked into his eyes. "I don't know," he said honestly. "After I amputated your arm and saw you lying there, something just told me I had to help you. I couldn't explain it then, and I still can't explain it now. Even when I packed to return home, I didn't plan to keep your arm. But when I saw it, something inside me said I had to bring it with me." For decades, he hadn't known what to do with the bone. Sometimes he would take it out, place it gently on a shelf, and sit in silence. It wasn't a trophy or an artifact. It was a part of someone's life, someone he had once saved. For Hung, seeing it again stirred something deep within. "I'm right-handed," he said. "Losing that arm changed everything. I had to relearn how to do everything. Eat, write, move. It took me 2 years just to learn to write again. Now, after nearly 5 decades, that life had come full circle." Sam wasn't just visiting. He was returning something that Hung thought was lost forever. As the reunion unfolded in Hung's modest home, emotion filled the air. That night, he barely slept. "I told my children," he said, "they must all come home to meet the man who saved my life and returned my arm after almost 50 years. He already knew what he would do with it. I will keep it safe," he told them. "And when I pass, I want it buried with me." Dr. Sam, holding back tears, said, "I feel relieved, like I've finally fulfilled a promise I made without realizing it. I've carried that piece of him for so long, I had to give it back." But not everything had a happy ending. Hung's wife, the woman who helped him rebuild his life, had passed away. Sam, deeply moved, said, "If only I had found him 2 years earlier, maybe I could have helped her. Brought her to the U.S. for treatment." With his remaining arm, Hung embraced Sam once more. "Why did you do it?" he asked. "Why keep it? Why come back?" Sam paused. "I still don't know. But maybe this is why. So we could write this story. So we could remind people that even in war, humanity can survive. There were many witnesses, family, neighbors, friends. Among them were Sam's sons and grandchildren. His son Chris said, "It's incredible to witness this moment. I know how much it means to my father, and I want my daughter to understand it too, to know what compassion looks like." Sam added, "I never felt like it belonged to me. Even after all these years, I was just holding on to something that didn't belong in my house, but had nowhere else to go. Until now." Despite his age and the long journey, Sam had traveled from Texas to Hanoi, then to Quy Nhon, and finally to An Khê, all to return something that had lived in his memory for decades. It wasn't about a bone. It was about peace. For himself, for Hung, and for history. Their story became a quiet testament to the strange bonds war can forge, not with bullets, but with grace. Two men, once enemies, were now bound by a single act of compassion. "Would you have done the same?" someone once asked Hung. "If you had someone's amputated arm, would you have kept it?" He shook his head. "No," he said. "Never. I wouldn't even think of it. That's why what Sam did, it's beyond words. It's the most human thing anyone's ever done for me." And so, the doctor who once saved a life and the soldier who once lost an arm stood together again, two old men smiling through tears, proving that even in war, there are still stories worth telling. Stories that remind us, kindness endures.